Amen to that. Amen to that. We got to get better at that. We got to get better at that. And church is this loaded word, but that's what we are. And what do we do about that? So Phil, I think, mentioned the fact that the fact that people don't want to go to church doesn't actually say anything about what they believe. This is a graph that shows of these folks who identify as non-religious. This is all adults. These are the folks who say they're atheists down here. This is the agnostics down here, and this is the folks who are nothing in particular. A lot of them believe in God. They may even pray or read the Bible or other sacred texts. So that means to me that there's a real hunger out there for spiritual engagement if we can figure out how to feed it. If we can figure out how to feed it. So let's talk about these non-religious folks out there. Maybe they're in here, but out there, the groups. Sometimes I don't know if you've ever heard them called the nuns. This is a confusing term for them. This is a confusing term for them because our WARE lecturer this year is going to be Sister Simone from Nuns on the Bus, but that's a different nun. That's a different nun, so we're going to have to figure that out. Anyways, this is actually a bigger and more diverse group than you may think. And there are two kind of streams within that going on. So let me tell you about those. The first have been termed the stable nuns. These are folks who really aren't seeking a congregational experience. They're not out looking for a church. They tend to skew younger, whiter, and sometimes more Asian, particularly on the Pacific coast, tend to be more educated, tend to be a little bit higher income. This is where you'll find the bulk of folks who identify as atheists and agnostics, humanists also. And so that's one group over there. The second group has been called the liminal nuns, and this is maybe not what you would think of when you think of people who are non-religious, but part of their thing is that actually their religious affiliation is in flux. It's in flux, and they've become a little bit interesting because when you ask them, so all these numbers come from surveys, and somebody says, "Do you have a religious affiliation?" You say yes or no, or here's what it is. And these folks may tell you one thing this year, and then they'll tell you something else next year. And they often have some other kind of connection to a congregation. They've got a family member. Maybe they used to be in a church and then they moved, and there's not really a church that they like there. They're pretty diverse across age, race, income, background, educational level. And this is a lot of the folks, I don't know if you've heard this number, that there are like 3 times as many people out there who say that they're UU as our core members of our congregation. I think a lot of them fall into this category, right? So we know these people. We know these people who are, their kid really is getting a lot out of the, the Neighboring Faith program, but they don't really, I guess they kind of come, and maybe they'll come on Easter or something, but they don't really come. They're not really members of the church, right? So this is a huge group, and it's even bigger than the surveys would have us believe because you can't nail them down because they're telling you different things every time. So this is actually a really big group out here. So that's just a little bit of detail because I think what we need is different kinds of strategies around these different sets of experiences. So let me talk about the liminal nuns first. And this is going to be, this is pretty familiar stuff for us. This is the stuff that we talk about a lot, and I just want to underline its importance. These are focusing on high-quality spiritual experiences or meaning-making experiences in our faith communities, in our congregations, dynamic, mission-driven organizations, streamlined leadership so we don't get caught up in process, the public witness, the justice work. That's a big part of who we are, making sure that folks know us for that in the community. Multi-generational, multicultural communities. Church is one of the few places in American society where people really make friends across generations. That's one of the precious things that we offer, and so holding that up and doubling down on that, and it can't just be one way to participate. There's got to be lots of ways. So this is probably what you think of when you think of how do we get better at what we're doing. I saw this. I had this meme. This is Morpheus from The Matrix, and he says, "What if I told you there doesn't need to be a different committee for everything?" Just think about it. Okay. And you say, Carrie, I know this, and we're working really hard on that right now. And I don't know, it kind of seems like a long road. Well, I'm here to give you some faith and inspiration and to tell you that there are lots of congregations who are succeeding in this right now. Let me tell you about 3. One is in New London, Connecticut, All Souls New London. All Souls New London outgrew their small Romanesque looking building or Gothic looking building, and they were thinking about doing an addition, but instead what they did is they bought the used car dealership across the street and turned it into this beautiful sanctuary, and they turned their old church building into a day shelter for homeless folks in the community working with interfaith partners across the city. That's All Souls New London. They get what's going on. And this is so much more accessible. They don't have stairs to get in, so that's great for the folks with mobility challenges. So it's light-filled, it's beautiful. That's All Souls New London. The UU Church of Ogden, Utah, smaller congregation. The UU Church of Ogden, Utah does multi-generational, intergenerational worship every Sunday. They just call it worship. And they're this wonderful little congregation. I even read this, I came across this blog post from some guy who was blogging, I'm gonna go to 52 congregations, one church a week, and like critiquing them all. And so he went to this church in Ogden and was like over the moon about it. And it was just so heartwarming to read that someone can kind of walk in and just have that experience. Here's the other thing that the church in Ogden did, is they started something called an outreach resource center, which is part of a network of resource centers for queer youth in the community, in a very conservative community in Utah. Talk about saving lives. Ogden is out there doing this by supporting this outreach center in their building. So that's Ogden. Who else do we have? Albuquerque, New Mexico. Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's a lovely congregation who also had a growth problem. Some people might call it a solution. And so what did they do? So they added another service on Sunday, and then they added another one, and then they added a music-based one, and they were still doing so well that they added branch campuses. They have now 3 different campuses, like 50 miles away from Albuquerque, and they live stream the ministers. This is the Reverend Christine Robinson here being live streamed into their worship. And they've got like leaders in those communities who work with them and who work with kind of the central parent church. So it's one church, but it's in like 4 different locations. So that's Albuquerque. They're doing some really cool stuff. There's lots of congregations that are experiencing, some people call that multi-site. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but there's some congregations that are experimenting with stuff like this right now. So all of these 3 that I just told you about are all breakthrough congregations of the UUA. Does anybody recognize that term, breakthrough congregations, right? So breakthrough congregations are ones who have achieved some really spectacular things. This is the full list, which I know you can't read from where you're sitting, but the point is that there are a lot of them. The point is that there are a lot of them, and there's more every year, and they all have stories, and you can read about all of their stories and the cool things that they've done on uua.org if you search for breakthrough congregations. So let's give a hand for our breakthrough congregations out there. If you want to know how it can be done, you can ask them. Let's go back, though, to that other group, the stable nuns, and my response to this is that we have to be willing to try some new things, some new ways of being in faith community. Just a couple of points here. We have to help people who are themselves trying new things. We have to be supportive of that. We've got to take advantage of technology. We've got to really pay attention to that time commitment issue and go for time-limited things, not like if you're not here every single week that you're failing at this. We've got to be willing to fail and learn from that and move on. We've got to be intentional about who we're reaching out to, and it's okay to say that we come from the UU faith tradition, but we're open to people of lots of other faiths, because that's who we're trying to be. We're really trying to be open to people from all kinds of belief systems and backgrounds. I have a couple other examples that I'm just going to breeze through. The SALT program, which stands for Spiritual Activist Leadership Training, is a program of the UU Justice Ministry of California, and it's a series of weekend trainings often focused on typically younger adults who are interested in justice work, and they have discussions and retreats and trips, and they have speakers, and it's like a year-long thing, and it's being duplicated right now in Boston by UU Mass Action. So they're working on that. Here's another one. I just came across this one last week. This is a camp at Rowe Conference Center, one of our conference centers up in Western Mass, and it's called Skill Set, a new retreat for emerging adults, which is like young adults, like the 18 to 25 kind of set. And it's pretty much what it says. I read through their website. I had known that Rowe, I had some conversations with Rowe about what they were looking to do, but this is a fabulous example of them trying new things. I don't know whether it's going to work or not, but they're going for that this summer. It doesn't just have to be young adults. Generational changes affect all of us. The Glacier Circle Senior Co-Housing Co-op in Davis, California was formed by a couple of UUs who met in church and said, we don't want to grow old alone. And they opened this to anyone, even though it's primarily rooted in this sense of UU community. And so it's a senior housing cooperative in Davis, California that I learned about when I was out there a couple weeks ago. Let me give you an example from outside Unitarian Universalism completely, if you really want to bend your mind. This is a group in Britain called the School of Life. And I think what they're trying to do is very church-like in its way. They have a location, they have classes, and they're a publishing company. They publish books. They also do personal one-on-one like therapy. They sell candles, and one of the candles here is Thoreau. And I'm like, what are you doing with our candle? Right, but so they're pulling from, so the School of Life, right, so this is a little bit further afield, but what I want to say is that I think we're playing in the same pool as folks who are doing stuff like this. We're playing in the same pool. So that's just to give you kind of a sense of what is possible out there. I would be remiss in my duty before you as the Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministries for the UUA if I didn't hold this point up, that I think we do so much wonderful work in youth ministry, and where we drop the ball is in the transition between youth and adulthood. And that's a two-part problem. One is all the stuff that we're talking about here today about making faith communities that people want to be a part of. And there's also attention to that specific transition and the challenges and the opportunities that are there right at that time. I just want you to know we are not the only people who struggle with this. I think this is in many part endemic to the model of congregational life and churches that we have. Our siblings in Protestant faiths and Reformed Judaism struggle with this as well. So paying attention to that bridging transition, I have to point that out. We can't just count on someday they'll come back with their kids, which is what I sometimes hear. We just looked at a whole bunch of numbers that said, I wouldn't bank on that. I wouldn't bank on that. There's an exciting program called Faith Architects that I've been working with to help get off the ground, which is a series of conferences specifically for adults who are trying to figure out where's my place in Unitarian Universalism as an adult. How can I find the pathways to leadership, to community, to connection, to meaning, to activism through my faith? So just stuff on the horizon. I don't know that we've figured this one out either. We certainly haven't. I just want you to know that there are a couple of good things going on right now. So we typically think, and the way that I've kind of set you up here is that, here's the stuff going on in the congregations, and here's the stuff going on outside of congregations. And this is the congregations, and this is the beyond. Right? If you've ever heard of Congregations and Beyond, which is a paper that our president authored. But I think that there's a third way through that, which is that congregations themselves are absolutely capable of trying all kinds of new things. And I, from where I sit, congregations themselves are actually ideal places to try as many crazy new ideas as you can possibly handle. And let me tell you why. Congregations have a lot at their disposal. They have legal standing and documentation. Have you ever tried to start something like in the community and you're like, oh crap, now I need to file a 501c3 application with the IRS. That is a huge pain, that takes months. But congregations have all of that standing already. You have relationships in the community, you have legitimacy, you have those deep ties, you have a measure of financial stability and income, you have committed volunteers, passionate leaders, talented, well-trained staff. All of these are things that you have at your disposal. And as we pointed out in our discussion with ministers and religious educators yesterday, there are no UU bishops out there telling you what you can and can't do. Believe me, there are no UU bishops out there. I just don't think it would work. You know what I'm saying? And the truth, too, is that we don't have to look far and wide for inspiration. I think we have it in our hearts, and I think we already have it in the young folks who are here, who, if you want to know what millennials want to do, then ask a millennial. We're all over the place, right? So that is that's the one thing that I want you to hear that's between those lines. That is, this doesn't have to be someone else. We don't all have to be fantastic, but we can all try some new approaches, recognizing that what's gotten us here is not what's going to carry us forward. So Andrea's telling me, I had all kinds of great examples for how this is going to happen. But since we're a little behind, I will make this presentation available to you all. There's wonderful ways in which this engages all the people who are at the margins of our community. It's really great. I'm going to skip it. And I want to just close with a quick parable, since we're at the balance of our time. 100 years ago, a man goes to see the wise woman, and I like to think that the wise woman in this story is the Dowager Countess of Grantham. If you watch Downton Abbey. It goes to see the wise woman and says, I want to change the world. And the wise woman says, well, if that's what you want to do, then you must command the loyalties of men. You must, because of course it was men. You have to build impressive structures and buildings. You have to have constitutions and bylaws and officers and roles and titles to show people that you're serious, that you can follow through. And then with that kind of respect, you can go out and change the world. Today, 100 years later, a man goes to see the wise woman who I like to think is Michelle Obama, and says, I want to change the world. How do I do that? And the wise woman says, all you need is legions of passionate volunteers united around a cause. You need 1,000 points of light, say maybe congregations, spread across the country. You need people who can speak from the heart, from the soles of their feet about what they care about and the world that they're trying to build together. You need to get your people organized and get them fired up and ready to go. So we may have inherited the structures of the past, but I firmly believe that we have already all the things that we need to live into the future that we dream about together and change the world in small ways and large each day that we remain committed to our faith. So, it's not the first time, it won't be the last that we've encountered generational change, but we are a bold people, so go forth in faith.